The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with nervous energy as Ambassador Zeftar of the Krelon Empire stood before the assembled delegates. His blue-scaled hands trembled slightly as he activated the holographic display, showing what appeared to be a standard cargo manifest from one of their mining vessels. "Esteemed colleagues," Zeftar began, his voice carrying the weight of impending doom, "I come before you today with news that may shake the very foundations of our peaceful galaxy." The chamber fell silent, hundreds of different species focusing their various sensory organs on the Krelon representative. The hologram shifted, displaying images of a remote asteroid mining operation in the Outer Rim territories. The facility looked ordinary enough: massive excavation equipment, processing plants, and living quarters for the workforce. Nothing seemed out of place until Zeftar zoomed in on a specific section of the complex. 3 standard galactic days ago, our mining supervisor, Captain Vexmol, made what he believed to be a routine discovery. Zeftar continued, his voice growing more strained. A small human vessel had crashed on the asteroid. The ship appeared to be a civilian transport, heavily damaged and showing signs of recent combat. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Humans were known throughout the galaxy, though most species gave them a wide berth. Their reputation for unpredictable violence and their tendency to survive impossible situations had made them something of a legend among the more civilized races. Captain Vexmol, following standard salvage protocols, investigated the wreckage, Zeftar said, his scales now shifting to a pale, sickly color. Inside, he found survivors. The ambassador paused, swallowing hard before continuing. 3 human offspring, children by their species standards. The oldest appeared to be no more than 12 standard years, the youngest perhaps 6. The chamber erupted in concerned chatter. Several delegates leaned forward in their seats, while others began whispering urgently to their advisors. The ethereal representative from the Crystal Collective actually flickered with alarm, their translucent form pulsing with worried energy. "Please, esteemed colleagues, allow me to continue," Zeftar pleaded, raising his hands for silence. Captain Vexmol, believing he was performing a humanitarian rescue, brought the children aboard our facility. They were injured, frightened, and alone. Medical scans showed they had been in stasis for several days, likely automatic life support systems keeping them alive after their vessel was attacked. Ambassador Thace of the Reptilian Union hissed softly. "Surely you provided them with proper care and immediately contacted human authorities." Zeftar's scales darkened further. "This is where our situation becomes complicated." Captain Vexmol, in his eagerness to help, failed to follow proper first contact protocols. He did not immediately report the discovery to either Galactic Council authorities or Human Space Command. Instead, he attempted to care for the children himself. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Every species present understood the implications of what they were hearing. Humans were fiercely protective of their young, and their responses to perceived threats against children were legendary in their brutality. "The children have been well cared for," Zeftar quickly added, seeing the horrified expressions around him. "Our medical staff has tended to their injuries. They have been fed and housed comfortably, and we have made every effort to communicate with them despite the language barriers." However, Captain Vexmol made a grave error in judgment. Prime Minister Quell of the Aquatic Federation's gills fluttered rapidly with anxiety. "What error? Speak plainly, Ambassador." "He classified the rescue as a mining equipment acquisition," Zeftar said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The children are listed in our official records as salvaged cargo." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the usually chattering insectoid delegates stopped their clicking and buzzing. The full weight of the situation settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. Commander Voss of the Mechanical Collective's optical sensors focused intently on the Krelon ambassador. "You are telling this assembly that your people have effectively documented the kidnapping of human children as a business transaction." "It was an administrative error," Zeftar protested, his scales now completely white with fear. Captain Vexmol panicked when he realized his mistake. He thought it would be easier to correct the paperwork later. "But the children have been aboard our facility for 3 days now, and he has been unable to reach human authorities through normal diplomatic channels." Ambassador Lithara of the Feline Sovereignty's tail lashed with agitation. "Has your captain considered that human authorities may already be aware of the missing children? That search parties may already be en route?" The color drained from what little remained in Zeftar's scales. This morning, our long-range sensors detected multiple human vessels entering our sector. Military vessels. They are broadcasting demands for information about their missing citizens and threatening to board and search every facility in the system. The chamber exploded into panicked discussions. Several smaller species representatives immediately began updating their home governments, while others started calculating the safest escape routes from council space. "How long before they reach your facility?" asked the towering representative from the silicon-based crystalline empire. "Approximately 18 standard hours," Zeftar replied, his voice breaking slightly. "Our facility is deep in the asteroid field, which may slow their approach, but these are humans we're discussing. They have a reputation for finding ways through obstacles that would stop other species." The ethereal representative spoke in harmonious tones that somehow conveyed deep concern. "Ambassador, surely you understand the gravity of this situation. Humans do not negotiate when their children are threatened. Their response to perceived attacks on their offspring has been documented across numerous conflicts. I am well aware of their reputation," Zeftar said miserably. "That is precisely why I have brought this matter before the Council. We need immediate assistance in resolving the situation before it escalates into something that could destabilize our entire sector." As if summoned by his words, an urgent communication signal began flashing on the main Council display. The origin codes showed it was coming from human space, specifically from their military command structure. "Should we answer it?" asked Prime Minister Quell nervously. Zeftar looked around the chamber at the sea of worried faces representing dozens of species. "I believe we have no choice. But I fear we are about to learn exactly why the rest of the galaxy has learned to avoid provoking humanity, especially when their children are involved." The communication request continued flashing, each pulse seeming to echo with the promise of the storm that was about to descend upon them all. The main view screen of the Galactic Council chambers flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Space Navy. Her dark eyes swept across the assembled delegates with the intensity of a predator sizing up potential threats. The silence in the chamber was so complete that the soft hum of the translation system seemed deafeningly loud. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council," Admiral Chen began, her voice carrying the cold precision of someone barely containing their fury. "I am Admiral Chen, commanding the task force currently approaching your territory. I will make this simple and clear, as I understand many of your species prefer direct communication." Ambassador Zeftar stepped forward, his scales still pale with fear. "Admiral Chen, we are honored by your presence and—" "Ambassador," Chen interrupted, her tone cutting through his words like a blade. 3 days ago, a civilian transport carrying a human family was attacked by pirates in the neutral zone adjacent to your territory. We have recovered the wreckage of the vessel and found evidence that the ship's emergency pods were deployed before the final explosion. The Admiral's image leaned forward slightly, and several delegates instinctively pulled back from their screens. "Our investigation indicates that one pod, containing 3 children, successfully reached an asteroid in your mining sector. We have been monitoring all communications in that area, and we know they are alive." Chancellor Mordak of the Crystalline Empire's faceted form pulsed with nervous energy. "Admiral, if you could provide us with the specific coordinates, we would be happy to assist in any search and rescue operations." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew colder. "Chancellor, our scans show a Krelon mining facility at the exact coordinates where the pod landed. We have attempted to contact this facility directly, but they have not responded to our hails. We find this concerning." Zeftar's hand shook as he activated his communicator. "Admiral, I must inform you that there has been a serious misunderstanding. Captain Vexmall of our mining facility did indeed discover the human children, but did you just confirm that your people have my citizens' children?" Chen's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout could have. The chamber filled with the sounds of various species expressing alarm in their native languages. Clicks, hisses, harmonic tones, and mechanical whirs created a symphony of anxiety. "They are safe," Zeftar quickly assured her. "They have received medical care, food, and shelter. Captain Vexmall was attempting to help them, but he made errors in following proper protocols." Admiral Chen's face remained expressionless for several long seconds. When she spoke again, her words were measured and deliberate. "Ambassador, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. In human culture, the protection of children supersedes all other considerations. All of them. Political alliances, trade agreements, diplomatic immunity, rules of engagement. Nothing matters when our children are in danger. The ethereal representative's form flickered rapidly. Admiral, surely we can resolve this through proper diplomatic channels. The Galactic Council has extensive experience in mediating such situations. With respect, Chen replied, though her tone suggested no respect whatsoever. This is not a diplomatic situation. This is a rescue operation. My task force consists of 12 warships, including 2 dreadnoughts and a carrier. We have authorization from the Human Colonial Authority to use any means necessary to recover our citizens. Commander Voss of the Mechanical Collective processed this information with visible concern. Admiral, are you threatening military action against a civilian mining facility? Commander, I'm stating facts, Chen responded coldly. We will reach the facility in 17 hours. When we arrive, we will retrieve our children. The method by which this occurs depends entirely on the cooperation we receive. Prime Minister Quell's gills were fluttering so rapidly they were almost a blur. But surely you understand that Captain Vexmol meant no harm. This was clearly a rescue situation that went wrong due to poor communication. Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained steel. Prime Minister, I appreciate that your intentions may have been good. However, from our perspective, 3 human children have been held for 3 days without any attempt to contact human authorities. In our records, they are listed as missing, potentially dead. Their parents believe they watched their children die in a pirate attack. The weight of this revelation settled over the assembly. Several delegates exchanged worried glances as they began to understand the emotional and political implications. Furthermore, Chen continued, our intelligence indicates that these children have been classified in your official records as salvaged cargo. Regardless of intent, this creates a legal and diplomatic nightmare that threatens to undermine decades of peaceful relations. Zeftar's scales had now turned completely transparent with terror. Admiral, I swear to you, this was an administrative error. Captain Vexmol panicked and made poor choices. But the children have been treated with care and respect. Ambassador, Chen said, her voice taking on a tone that made several delegates shiver. In human law, kidnapping is a capital offense. In human culture, anyone who harms or threatens children becomes an enemy of our entire species. I am trying very hard to believe that this was a misunderstanding, but my patience has limits. The communication screen split to show tactical displays of the approaching human fleet. The ships were massive, bristling with weapons, and moving with purpose through the asteroid field that should have slowed them down. As you can see, Admiral Chen explained, we have already begun our approach. We are not requesting permission to enter your territory. We are informing you that we are coming. The children will be returned to human custody within 24 hours, one way or another. Ambassador Lithara of the Feline Sovereignty spoke carefully. Admiral, what would you require from us to ensure this situation is resolved peacefully? I want immediate communication with Captain Vexmol and visual confirmation that the children are unharmed, Chen replied without hesitation. I want them prepared for transfer to our medical frigate, and I want a full explanation of how 3 children ended up classified as mining equipment in your records. And if we provide all of this? Chancellor Mordak asked nervously. Admiral Chen's expression remained unchanged. Then we take our children home, and this becomes a matter for the diplomatic corps to sort out later. But understand this, any delay, any excuse, any sign that those children have been harmed in any way, and this becomes a military operation with all that entails. The insectoid delegate's translator crackled as they spoke. Admiral, surely you cannot be threatening war over 3 individuals even if they are children. The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Admiral Chen finally spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute conviction. Delegate, you clearly don't understand humans as well as you think you do. We have fought wars over smaller matters than this. Our children are not negotiable. They are not acceptable losses. They are not diplomatic leverage. They are our future, and we will burn down the galaxy before we let harm come to them. The communication ended abruptly, leaving the Galactic Council chamber in stunned silence as the reality of their situation began to sink in. Captain Vexmol paced nervously in his private quarters aboard the mining facility, his forearms gesticulating wildly as he spoke into his communicator. The Krelon officer's usually composed demeanor had completely crumbled since receiving the urgent transmission from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Zeftar, you must understand I never intended for this to become an interstellar incident. Vexmol's voice cracked with desperation. The children were injured and frightened. I couldn't just leave them to die in that wreckage. Through the communicator, Zeftar's strained voice replied, Captain, your good intentions may have just triggered the first war this galaxy has seen in over 2 centuries. The human fleet is less than 16 hours away, and they are not coming to negotiate. Vexmol's secondary arms trembled as he pulled up the facility security feeds showing the 3 human children in the converted storage bay he had hastily turned into temporary quarters. The oldest child, a girl with short brown hair, sat protectively between her 2 younger siblings, a boy who couldn't be more than 8, and a tiny girl who still clutched a stuffed animal that had somehow survived the crash. They're just babies, Vexmol whispered, his voice filled with genuine anguish. How was I supposed to know that humans would react so violently to a rescue operation? Because you should have consulted the cultural database before taking any action. Zeftar snapped. Every species in the galaxy knows that humans are dangerously protective of their offspring. It's literally the first entry in their diplomatic profile. On the security feed, the eldest child looked up at the camera with large, frightened eyes. She had been trying to communicate with the facility staff using gestures and simple drawings, but the language barrier had made meaningful conversation impossible. The medical scans showed she had sustained a concussion and several broken ribs in the crash, but she refused to rest while her siblings needed her protection. Sir, came a voice from Vexmol's door communicator. You have an urgent message from our long-range sensors operator. Enter, Vexmol called, and a young Krelon technician hurried in, his scales flushed with excitement and terror. Captain, the human fleet has somehow cut through the asteroid field faster than our calculations predicted. They'll be here in 12 hours, not 16. And sir, they're not just military vessels. We're detecting what appears to be a medical ship and, Captain, one of the ships is broadcasting a signal that our computers identify as a human family distress call. Vexmol felt his heart sink. Family distress call? Yes, sir. It appears to be parents searching for their children. The signal contains genetic markers and family photos that match the 3 younglings we rescued. The reality of the situation hit Vexmol like a meteor strike. These weren't just random human children. They had parents who were actively searching for them. Parents who believed their children were dead. Parents who were now racing across space in warships to find them. Captain, the technician continued nervously. There's more. We've intercepted human military communications. They're not planning to dock peacefully. They intend to breach our hull and board us by force if we don't surrender the children immediately upon their arrival. Zeftar's voice crackled through the communicator again. Captain, are you still there? The Council is demanding immediate visual proof that the children are unharmed. The human admiral wants to see them within the hour. Vexmol's mind raced as he tried to process the magnitude of his mistake. In his panic over the administrative error, he had made everything worse by waiting too long to correct it. Now, instead of dealing with a simple bureaucratic mix-up, he was facing an armed invasion by one of the galaxy's most feared military forces. I need to talk to them, Vexmol said suddenly. The children, they need to understand what's happening. Captain, they don't speak our language, and we don't have proper translation equipment for humans, the technician pointed out. Then we'll figure something else out, Vexmol replied grimly. Gather all the translation matrices we have. Find someone who knows anything about human communication protocols, and get me every piece of information we have about human family structures and child psychology. 20 minutes later, Vexmol stood outside the converted storage bay that housed the 3 children, armed with a crude translation device and a heart full of regret. The door slid open and the eldest child immediately moved to shield her siblings, her young face set in the expression of determined defiance that reminded Vexmol uncomfortably of the stories he had heard about human warriors. Children, he said, the translation device converting his words into halting, mechanical-sounding human speech. I am Captain Vexmol. I need to speak with you about your parents. The girl's eyes widened at the mention of parents and she stepped forward cautiously. Are Mama and Papa looking for us? She asked, her voice small but brave. The translation device struggled with the childish words, but Vexmol understood enough. Yes, he said gently. They are coming to take you home. They will be here very soon. All three children began crying, not from fear but from relief and joy. The youngest girl dropped her stuffed animal and ran toward Vexmol, wrapping her tiny arms around his lower leg in a gesture of pure, innocent gratitude. We thought they were dead, the oldest child sobbed. The bad ships hurt our transport and everything went dark and we thought Mama and Papa died. Vexmol felt something break inside his chest as he realized the full scope of what these children had endured. They had not only survived a pirate attack and a crash landing, but they had spent 3 days believing their parents were dead, trapped in an alien facility with beings they couldn't communicate with. Your parents are alive, he assured them through the translator. They have been searching for you since the attack. They are bringing many ships to make sure you get home safely. How many ships? The middle child asked, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Vexmol hesitated. Many ships. 12 very large ships with many people whose job is to protect children like you. The oldest girl studied his face with the unsettling intelligence that human children often displayed. You're scared, she observed. Are you scared of Mama and Papa? From the mouths of babes, Vexmol thought. I am scared that I made mistakes that might make them angry with me, he admitted. I was trying to help you, but I did not follow the right rules, and now they might think I was trying to hurt you. The little girl who had hugged his leg looked up at him with enormous blue eyes. But you gave us food and medicine and warm blankets. You helped us. Will you tell them that? Vexmol asked desperately. Will you tell your parents that we tried to take care of you? All three children nodded solemnly, and for the first time in 3 days, Vexmol felt a glimmer of hope that he might survive the next 12 hours. But even as the children promised to speak on his behalf, his communicator crackled with an urgent message from the bridge. Captain, the human fleet has just increased speed again. They'll be here in 8 hours. And they're sending a message demanding immediate surrender of the facility. Vexmol closed his eyes and wondered if human parents' love for their children would be enough to prevent a bloodbath when that fleet arrived. The bridge of the human dreadnought Righteous Fury hummed with controlled intensity as Admiral Chen reviewed the tactical displays, showing the Krelon mining facility. Every member of her crew moved with purpose, their faces set in grim determination that spoke of their shared understanding of the mission's importance. Admiral, reported Commander Torres from the communication station, we're receiving a transmission from the mining facility. Captain Vexmol is requesting permission to speak with you directly. Put him through, Chen replied, her voice carrying the same cold precision that had marked all her communications since learning of the missing children. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the nervous face of Captain Vexmol. The Krelon officer's forearms gestured nervously as he began speaking, his universal translator struggling to keep up with his rapid, anxious words. Admiral Chen, I must first say that the 3 human children in my care are completely unharmed and have been treated with the utmost respect and kindness, Vexmol began, his scales pale with fear. I know this situation appears terrible, but I swear to you by my ancestors' honor that I meant only to help them. Admiral, Chen studied the alien captain with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent decades learning to read the intentions of potential enemies. Captain Vexmol, I want to see the children now. Of course, Admiral. I have prepared a live feed from their quarters. The screen split to show a second image, revealing the 3 children sitting together on what appeared to be makeshift bedding. The eldest girl looked up at the camera and waved tentatively. The change in Admiral Chen's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. The icy control she had maintained for days cracked as she saw her people's children alive, and apparently well. Her hands gripped the arms of her command chair, and several bridge officers turned to look at her with concern. Emma, Chen called softly to the screen. Emma Morrison? The girl's face lit up with recognition. Admiral Chen, Mama and Papa showed me pictures of you. Are you here to take us home? Yes, sweetheart, we're here to take you home, Chen replied, her voice now warm with maternal affection. Are you and your brother and sister okay? Are you hurt? 8-year-old Michael pushed forward into the camera's view. I had a hurt arm, but the blue people fixed it with their medicine. They gave us food too, but it tastes funny. Little Sarah, barely 6 years old, held up her stuffed elephant. They kept Mr. Peanut safe for me when I was sleeping. Admiral Chen felt tears threatening to form, but she forced herself to maintain composure. Are Mama and Papa with you? Emma asked hopefully. They're right here with me, Emma, Chen replied, gesturing off camera. "They've been very worried about you." The camera angle adjusted to show David and Rebecca Morrison stepping into view. Rebecca was crying openly, while David's jaw was set in the same determined expression his daughter had inherited. "My babies," Rebecca sobbed. "We thought we lost you." "The bad ships hurt our transport," Michael explained seriously. "But the pod worked like Papa taught us, and we landed on the rock where the blue people found us." David Morrison stepped closer to the screen, his engineer's mind already processing the technical aspects of what his children had endured. "Emma, how long were you in the pod before they found you?" "I think maybe one day," Emma replied. "Michael was hurt and Sarah was scared. But I remembered what you taught me about being brave when grown-ups can't help right away." Captain Vexmol, who had been listening to this exchange with growing relief, spoke up again. "Admiral, as you can see, the children are safe and well. I deeply regret the administrative errors that caused this misunderstanding, but I hope you can see that my intentions were honorable." Admiral Chen's expression hardened again as she turned her attention back to the Krelon captain. "Captain, while I'm grateful that you rescued my people's children, you must understand that your failure to immediately contact human authorities created a diplomatic crisis. These children's parents have spent 3 days believing their babies were dead. I understand, Admiral, and I take full responsibility for my mistakes," Vexmol replied humbly. "I panicked when I realized the errors I had made, and in trying to fix them quietly, I only made the situation worse." Commander Torres spoke up from his station. "Admiral, we're receiving priority communications from the Galactic Council. They're requesting immediate updates on the situation." "Tell them the children are safe and unharmed," Chen replied. "But also tell them that we still need to discuss how to prevent this kind of incident from happening again." On the screen, Emma was whispering something to her siblings. After a moment, she looked back at the camera with the serious expression of a child trying to act like an adult. "Admiral Chen," Emma said carefully, "Captain Vexmol and his people took good care of us. They gave us medicine when we were hurt, and food when we were hungry, and they tried to talk to us even though we couldn't understand each other. I think they were scared they did something wrong, but they were nice to us." The bridge of the Righteous Fury fell silent as a 12-year-old girl inadvertently provided a character reference for her alien rescuers. Several crew members exchanged glances, their expressions softening slightly. Michael nodded enthusiastically. "They have a person who looks like a big flower who sang pretty songs for Sarah when she had bad dreams." Admiral Chen felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. "Captain Vexmol, it appears you have some very effective advocates. Children are remarkably forgiving." "Admiral?" Vexmol replied, his scales beginning to show the first hints of their normal coloration. "But I understand that their parents and their government may not be so understanding." David Morrison stepped closer to the screen again. "Captain, as the children's father, I want to thank you for keeping them safe. But as a human citizen, I need to know that safeguards will be put in place to prevent this kind of communication breakdown in the future." "Absolutely, Mr. Morrison," Vexmol agreed quickly. "I have already submitted a full report to my superiors, and the Galactic Council detailing my errors and recommending new protocols for situations involving human civilians." "Admiral," came a voice from the tactical station. "We're within docking range of the facility. Should we proceed with the planned boarding operation?" Admiral Chen studied the screens showing both the nervous alien captain and the 3 human children who had become the center of an interstellar incident. "Negative," she replied finally. "Signal the facility that we're requesting permission to dock for peaceful transfer of the children to our medical frigate." "Captain Vexmol, are you prepared to transfer custody of the children to their parents?" "More than prepared, Admiral," Vexmol replied with obvious relief. "I never wanted to keep them. I only wanted to make sure they were safe until they could be returned to their families." Emma Morrison looked directly into the camera with the piercing gaze that had probably gotten her in trouble more than once at school. "Can we say goodbye to our new friends before we go home?" Admiral Chen smiled for the first time in 3 days. "Of course you can, sweetheart. That's exactly what we're going to do." The docking bay of the Krelon mining facility had never hosted such an important gathering. Captain Vexmol stood nervously beside his senior staff as the airlock cycled open to admit the human delegation. He had spent the last hour ensuring that every protocol was followed perfectly, desperate to avoid any further mistakes that might reignite the crisis. Admiral Chen stepped through the airlock first, flanked by 2 security officers and followed closely by David and Rebecca Morrison. The parents' eyes immediately swept the bay, searching for their children with the intensity of predators protecting their territory. "Captain Vexmol," Admiral Chen said formally, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for your cooperation in resolving this situation." Vexmol carefully took her hand with one of his forearms, having studied human customs frantically over the past few hours. "Admiral Chen, it is my honor to return your people's children to their family." "Where are they?" David Morrison asked, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "They are in the medical bay receiving final health checks from our doctor," Vexmol explained quickly. "Dr. Silthera wanted to ensure they were completely ready for transfer. They should be here momentarily." As if summoned by his words, the internal doors slid open to reveal the 3 Morrison children walking hand in hand with a tall, graceful being that resembled a flowering plant. Dr. Silthara of the Botanical Collective had been working overtime to ensure the children were in perfect health for their reunion. "Mama, Papa." Sarah Morrison broke free from the group and ran across the bay with her arms outstretched. Her parents met her halfway, sweeping her up in a tearful embrace that seemed to drain all the tension from the room. Michael and Emma followed more slowly, their natural caution warring with their excitement. When they reached their parents, the family dissolved into a tangle of hugs, tears, and whispered reassurances. Admiral Chen watched the reunion with professional satisfaction, but her attention was drawn to the way the alien medical officer lingered nearby, clearly concerned about her former patients. "Dr. Silthera," Chen addressed the plant-like being, "I understand you've been caring for the children's medical needs." "Yes, Admiral," Dr. Silthera replied through her translator, her voice carrying harmonious tones like wind through leaves. The eldest sustained a moderate concussion and several fractured ribs in the crash. The middle child had a dislocated shoulder and various contusions. The youngest was primarily suffering from shock and minor dehydration. Rebecca Morrison looked up from her tearful reunion. "Are they completely healed?" "The fractures have been mended using our regenerative therapy," Dr. Silthera explained gently. "The concussion has fully resolved and all other injuries have healed completely. However, I would recommend continued monitoring for any signs of delayed trauma response." "Thank you," David Morrison said simply, but his words carried profound gratitude. "Thank you for taking care of them." Captain Veximol stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, I cannot begin to express my regret for the fear and pain my mistakes caused you. I know that words cannot undo the days you spent believing your children were lost, but please know that they were never in any danger while in our care." Emma Morrison, still clinging to her mother's hand, looked up at the alien captain. "Captain Vexmol taught us how to play a Krelon game called Mind Bridges," she said solemnly. "It's like chess, but with 4 players and emotion cards. And the flower lady sang us songs," Michael added, smiling at Dr. Silthera. "She knows songs from 17 different planets." Sarah held up her stuffed elephant. "They fixed Mr. Peanut's ear when it got torn." Admiral Chen observed the interaction with interest. Despite the diplomatic crisis, the children had clearly bonded with their alien caregivers. This was information that would be crucial for her final report on the incident. "Captain," Admiral Chen said, "I need to ask you some questions for my official report. First, why didn't you immediately contact human authorities when you found the children?" Vexmol's scales darkened with shame. "Admiral, I am ashamed to admit that I panicked. When I found 3 injured human children in a crashed pod, my first instinct was to get them medical care immediately. By the time I realized I should have contacted human authorities first, several hours had passed, and I convinced myself it would be better to ensure they were stable before making any calls. And the administrative error that classified them as salvaged cargo? That was my attempt to hide my mistake," Vexmol admitted miserably. "When my second-in-command asked how to log the rescue in our official records, I panicked again and told him to classify it as equipment salvage while I figured out the proper procedures. I thought I could correct it quietly once I had contacted the appropriate authorities." Admiral Chen nodded grimly. "Captain, while I understand that your intentions were good, your actions created a diplomatic incident that could have resulted in armed conflict. Do you understand the severity of this?" "Completely, Admiral," Vexmol replied. "I have submitted my resignation to Krelon Command and recommended myself for disciplinary action." "Wait," Emma Morrison interrupted, pulling away from her parents to face Admiral Chen. You're not going to punish Captain Vexmol, are you? He saved us. Emma, sweetheart, it's complicated, her father began, but she shook her head firmly. No, Papa, it's not complicated, Emma said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. The bad pirates tried to hurt us, and Captain Vexmol's people made us safe. Yes, he should have called you sooner, but he was scared and made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Michael nodded seriously. Admiral Chen, in school they teach us that heroes are people who help others even when they're scared. Captain Vexmol was scared, but he still helped us. Admiral Chen found herself in the unusual position of being lectured on justice by children. She looked at the Morrison parents, who were watching their children with obvious pride. What do you think? Chen asked David Morrison quietly. As the children's father, how do you want this handled? David exchanged a long look with his wife before answering. Admiral, I think my children have learned something important about the difference between malice and mistakes. Captain Vexmol made errors in judgment, but he kept our babies safe when they needed help most. Rebecca Morrison spoke up. We're not saying there shouldn't be consequences or new procedures to prevent this from happening again. But we don't want the person who saved our children to be destroyed for making human mistakes while doing something fundamentally right. Dr. Silthera's harmonious voice added to the conversation. Admiral, if I may speak as the children's attending physician, they showed no signs of distress or fear regarding their caregivers. In fact, they demonstrated remarkable resilience and formed positive attachments with the staff. This suggests that despite the procedural errors, they were treated with genuine care and kindness. Admiral Chen looked around the bay at the assembled group. Nervous alien rescuers, grateful human parents, and 3 children who had somehow managed to turn a diplomatic crisis into a lesson about forgiveness and the complexity of good intentions. Captain Vexmol, she said finally, while there will need to be official consequences for the procedural failures that created this crisis, I will be recommending in my report that your actions be evaluated in the context of a successful rescue operation, complicated by administrative errors, not as a deliberate act of aggression against human civilians. The relief on Vexmol's face was visible, as his scales shifted to a healthier color. Thank you, Admiral. That is more than I deserve. No, said Emma Morrison firmly. It's exactly what you deserve. You saved us, and now maybe other people will learn how to save children better too. 3 weeks after the Morrison children's rescue, the Galactic Council chambers buzzed with a different kind of energy than the panicked chaos that had marked their previous emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to hear the final report on what was already being called the Morrison Incident throughout civilized space. Ambassador Zeftar stood before the assembly once again, but his scales now showed healthy blue coloration rather than the pale white of terror. Beside him stood Admiral Chen, Captain Vexmol, and surprisingly, the Morrison family themselves. Esteemed colleagues, Zeftar began, we gather today not to address a crisis but to learn from one. The events of the past month have revealed critical gaps in our interspecies emergency protocols that could have led to tragic consequences. Admiral Chen stepped forward, her bearing still commanding but notably less tense than during the height of the crisis. The human government has completed its investigation into this incident. While we found significant procedural failures that created unnecessary diplomatic tension, we also found clear evidence that the Krelon facility staff acted with genuine care and concern for the children's welfare. Captain Vexmol, who had expected to spend these weeks in a detention facility awaiting court-martial, instead found himself standing before the galaxy's most powerful diplomatic body as an example of how good intentions could go catastrophically wrong. If I may address the assembly, Vexmol said nervously, I want to share what I learned from my mistakes, in hopes that other commanders will not repeat them. Chancellor Mordak of the Crystalline Empire pulsed with interest. Captain, please proceed. The first lesson, Vexmol began, is that emergency protocols exist for reasons that may not be immediately obvious. When I found 3 injured human children, my instinct was to provide immediate care, which was correct. However, my failure to simultaneously notify both human authorities and the Galactic Council created a information vacuum that allowed fear and misunderstanding to grow. He gestured to a holographic display, showing new communication protocols. Working with Admiral Chen's staff, we have developed emergency notification procedures that require immediate contact with both the injured party's government and council authorities whenever civilians of any species are involved in rescue operations. Prime Minister Quell of the Aquatic. Federation's gills fluttered with approval. This seems logical. What other changes are being recommended? Admiral Chen activated another display showing revised diplomatic procedures. The second major issue was the administrative classification error. Captain Vexmol's staff lacked clear guidelines for how to document interspecies rescue operations, leading to the children being classified as salvaged cargo rather than rescued civilians. The gasps of horror from several species showed that the full implications of this error were still shocking to many delegates. We have worked with the Council's legal committee to establish standardized documentation procedures for all civilian rescue operations, Chen continued. These procedures include mandatory immediate notification of the rescued party's government and automatic legal protections for both the rescuers and the rescued. Dr. Sil Thera, who had traveled from the mining facility to provide medical testimony, spoke in her harmonious voice. From a medical perspective, we also learned the importance of species-specific care protocols. While our general emergency medicine saved the children's lives, we lacked detailed knowledge of human child psychology and nutritional needs. Emma Morrison, now fully recovered and sitting between her parents in the gallery, raised her hand like she was in school. "Can I say something?" The entire assembly turned to look at the 12-year-old girl who had inadvertently sparked an interstellar incident. Admiral Chen smiled and nodded. "I think all the grown-ups are missing something important," Emma said clearly, her voice carrying throughout the chamber thanks to the translation systems. Captain Vexmol and his people weren't perfect, but they were kind. They were scared of making mistakes, but they still tried to help us. She stood up, looking remarkably composed for someone addressing the galaxy's most powerful political body. Maybe instead of just having better rules, we should also teach people not to be so scared of asking for help when they don't know what to do. Michael Morrison nodded seriously. "When I didn't know how to fix my broken toy, I asked Papa for help. Captain Vexamol should have asked Admiral Chen for help instead of trying to fix everything by himself." The simplicity of this observation struck the assembly like a lightning bolt. Here were children explaining that the root cause of the crisis wasn't malice or incompetence, but fear of admitting uncertainty. Ambassador Lithara, of the feline sovereignty's tail, swished thoughtfully. "The children raise an important point. Perhaps we have created a diplomatic culture where admitting confusion or asking for guidance is seen as weakness rather than wisdom, Commander." Voss of the Mechanical Collective processed this information with visible interest. In mechanical systems, requesting clarification when uncertain is considered essential for proper function. Perhaps biological entities require similar protocols. The ethereal representative's form flickered with contemplation. We have become so focused on proper procedures that we may have lost sight of the underlying purpose, the protection and care of all sentient beings. David Morrison stood to address the assembly. "As the children's father and as an engineer, I want to emphasize that Captain Vexmol's core decisions were correct. He prioritized immediate medical care, provided shelter and sustenance, and treated my children with kindness and respect. His errors were in communication and documentation, not in the fundamental choice to help children in need," Rebecca Morrison added. "We don't want to live in a galaxy where people are afraid to help others because they might make administrative mistakes. The fear of bureaucratic error should never override the moral imperative to protect children." Captain Vexmol stepped forward again, his scales showing deep emotional resonance. "The Morrison family's forgiveness has been more meaningful to me than any official exoneration could be. But their trust also carries responsibility. We must ensure that the next being who finds children in danger feels confident in both helping them and immediately connecting them with their families." Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. Which brings us to the final recommendations from this investigation. The human government is proposing the establishment of a galaxy-wide emergency response network, specifically for incidents involving civilians, especially children. The display showed a comprehensive communication system that would allow any facility in council space to immediately contact the appropriate authorities for any species while simultaneously providing real-time medical and cultural guidance. This system would have allowed Captain Vexmol to provide excellent care for the children while maintaining constant communication with both human authorities and the Council, Chen explained. It removes the false choice between immediate aid and proper notification. Ambassador Zeftar smiled, the first genuine smile the Assembly had seen from him in weeks. Are there any objections to implementing these recommendations? The vote was unanimous. As the session concluded, Emma Morrison looked up at Captain Vexmol. So you're not in trouble anymore? No, little one, he replied gently. Thanks to you and your family, I am not in trouble. Instead, I get to help make sure that no other children ever get lost from their parents the way you did. Good, Emma said firmly, because you're really good at taking care of kids, even if you're not very good at paperwork. The laughter that filled the chamber marked the end of a crisis and the beginning of a new era of interspecies cooperation. 6 months later, the new galaxy-wide emergency response network faced its first major test when a massive transport accident in the Vega sector left dozens of mixed-species civilians stranded on a hostile world. The difference in response was immediately apparent to everyone involved. Captain Vexmol, now serving as the Krelon Empire's Chief of Emergency Civilian Affairs, stood in the newly constructed Emergency Coordination Center aboard the Council Station. Multiple screens showed real-time feeds from rescue operations across 3 different star systems, each one managed with the streamlined efficiency that the Morrison incident had made possible. Captain, called his aide, a young Krelon officer named Tesul, we're receiving an emergency beacon from Sector 7. It appears to be a human research vessel with engine failure. Excellent, Vexmol replied, his confidence a stark contrast to the panicked creature he had been 6 months earlier. Activate Protocol Morrison. Get me immediate contact with Human Space Command, Galactic Medical Response, and local rescue assets. And Tesul, remember to notify the families. Protocol Morrison, sir? The young officer asked curiously. Vexmol smiled, his scales showing the calm blue of someone who had learned from his mistakes. That's what the rescue teams are calling the new emergency procedures, named after 3 human children who taught the galaxy that good intentions need good systems to support them. Across the galaxy, word of the new protocols had spread far beyond official diplomatic channels. In cantinas and trading posts, on merchant vessels and research stations, beings from hundreds of different species shared stories about the Morrison incident and its aftermath. On the human colony world of New Terra, the Morrison children had become something of celebrities. Though their parents worked hard to keep their lives as normal as possible, Emma Morrison, now 13 and taller than her mother, often found herself giving presentations to school groups about her experience. The important thing to remember, Emma would tell younger children, is that being scared doesn't make you brave or not brave. Being brave means helping people even when you are scared. Captain Vexmol was really scared, but he still saved us. Michael Morrison, now 9 and obsessed with space engineering, had built an impressive model of the Krelon mining facility in his bedroom. He could explain in detail how the emergency pods worked and had even suggested improvements to the design that his father was actually considering implementing. Sarah Morrison, barely 7 but wise beyond her years, still carried Mr. Peanuts everywhere. When asked about her experience, she would usually say simply, "The blue people were nice to us when we were lost, and now they know how to be nice to other lost children too." Admiral Chen, reviewing monthly reports from the Emergency Response Network, was amazed by the statistics. Response times for civilian emergencies had improved by an average of 73%. Interspecies diplomatic incidents related to rescue operations had dropped to nearly 0. Most importantly, no civilian, adult or child, had been lost or misclassified since the system went online. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we're receiving a priority message from Captain Vexmol at the Emergency Coordination Center." Chen smiled as the familiar blue-scaled face appeared on her screen. Over the past months, she had developed a genuine friendship with the Krelon officer, built on their shared understanding of how quickly good intentions could go wrong without proper support. "Admiral Chen," Vexmol said cheerfully, "I wanted to update you on today's rescue in Sector 7. The human research vessel Discovery suffered engine failure in an asteroid field. Using Protocol Morrison, we had their families notified, medical teams dispatched, and rescue vessels en route within 17 minutes of receiving their distress call." "Excellent work, Captain," Chen replied. Any complications? None whatsoever. The research team is already safely aboard the rescue vessel and will be reunited with their families within 6 hours. More importantly, the entire operation was documented properly from the beginning, so there's no confusion about anyone's status or well-being. Chen nodded approvingly. How are the families handling the notification process? Much better than we hoped, Vexmall reported. The immediate notification protocols mean that families know their loved ones are in rescue hands, rather than wondering if they're dead or alive. The psychological impact has been remarkably positive. Captain, Chen said, I have some news that might interest you. The Morrison family has requested permission to visit the Emergency Coordination Center. They want to see how their experience has been turned into something that helps others. Veximol's scales brightened with pleasure. I would be honored to host them, Admiral. Those children saved my career and possibly my life with their wisdom and forgiveness. They saved more than that. Chen replied seriously. They saved the galaxy from a future filled with well-meaning disasters. Their ability to see past mistakes to intentions has changed how we all approach emergency response. 3 weeks later, the Morrison family stood in the Emergency Coordination Center, watching trained professionals manage rescue operations across dozens of star systems. The technology was impressive, but what struck them most was the confidence and competence of the staff. Look at all the screens, Michael exclaimed, pointing at displays showing everything from medical evacuations to stranded explorers. Each one represents someone who won't have to experience what you children went through, Dr. Silthara explained, her harmonious voice filled with satisfaction. Families who won't spend days wondering if their loved ones are alive. Emma studied the main display, which showed response times and success rates for the past month. Captain Vexmall, she said thoughtfully, do you think what happened to us was worth it? I mean, if it helped all these other people? Vexmall considered the question carefully. Emma, I would never wish for children to be in danger, but I am grateful that your experience taught us how to be better at helping people. Your family's forgiveness showed the galaxy that mistakes don't have to become tragedies if we're willing to learn from them. David Morrison put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Sometimes the worst experiences can lead to the best changes, sweetheart. You three turned a diplomatic crisis into a lesson in compassion and competence. Sarah Morrison looked up at the towering figure of Captain Vexmall and held up her arms. He carefully lifted her up, his forearms supporting her easily. Are you still scared sometimes? She asked him directly. Yes, he admitted honestly. But now when I'm scared, I know who to call for help. And I know that asking for help makes me better at helping others. Good, Sarah said seriously, because heroes ask for help when they need it. As the family prepared to leave, Emma paused at the main display showing the galaxy-wide network of emergency responders. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species, all connected by communication networks that ensured no cry for help would go unanswered or misunderstood. Papa, she said quietly, I'm proud that our scary time helped make this. David Morrison looked at his remarkable daughter, then at the vast network of compassion and competence that had grown from their family's crisis. So am I, sweetheart. So am I. The Morrison incident had become the Morrison Protocol, and the galaxy was safer for it. 3 children had taught the universe that the measure of civilization wasn't the absence of mistakes, but the wisdom to learn from them and the courage to do better. In emergency centers across known space, a simple motto had been adopted, translated into thousands of languages but carrying the same essential message. Help first, ask questions while helping. Never stop caring. It was a lesson learned from 3 human children who had turned a diplomatic disaster into a triumph of interspecies cooperation, one act of forgiveness at a time.